evening and thank you for joining us. We'll get to that major weather news in a few moments, but first we want to bring you the latest on what we know about a dangerous aerial encounter in the sky today between the United States and Russia.
The Pentagon has declassified video from a surveillance drone which a Russian jet sent crashing into the Black Sea off Ukraine. It plays out the critical moments of the mid-air encounter.
The Alaskan tundra vibrates under the roar of military engines. At Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson, the cold sky is filled with the echoes of American aircraft, reminders of a time when the contest for air dominance was defined by a clear, singular adversary. In the shadow of the Cold War, these displays were symbols of the American capacity to deter and prevail, a tradition maintained through decades of evolving technology and doctrine. The historical weight of these aircraft underscores their significance, each flight a testament to investment, training, and the continued importance of readiness. Yet while the past lingers in the noise of afterburners and the spectacle of flight, a more pressing reality emerges. The era of guaranteed air supremacy is becoming less certain. In staterooms and war rooms alike, anxieties grow over the progress of potential rivals and the new technologies reshaping the balance of power. Across the expanse of Eurasia, a development in Russian aviation is drawing renewed focus. The Su-57 stealth fighter, presented by Russian media as the nation's leap forward in military aerospace, the Su-57 signals modernization in intent and capability. Designed to merge advanced systems with elements of past doctrine, it is now reaching operational units within the Russian aerospace forces. Government narratives cast it as a response to Western advancements and as a tool for Russia's broader ambitions, inside and beyond its borders. Inside American military planning circles, these moves trigger complex debates. The United States has long invested in its technological edge, embodied by fifth-generation fighters like the F-22 Raptor. Yet there is recognition that the pace of innovation elsewhere is accelerating. The U.S. Navy, for example, continues its focus on the need for a sixth-generation successor, the F/A-XX, in anticipation of future threats. At the same time, the Su-57's potential deployment abroad, possibly as early as 2025, through the export-oriented Su-57E, forces strategists to weigh both tangible and psychological impacts. Is this Russian fighter a formidable new peer, or is its profile inflated more by narrative than by operational fact? The Su-57's reported integration of hypersonic missiles further complicates the equation. This next-generation fighter introduces not just improved weaponry, but also evolving doctrine, a signal to adversaries that both the tools and rules of air conflict are changing. Even in limited numbers, a stealth fighter with new weapons systems can prompt new considerations in defense postures and war game scenarios. As competition intensifies, one fact becomes unavoidable: the prospect of uncontested air dominance is slipping, replaced by a landscape defined by ever-shifting technological and doctrinal boundaries. A fighter reforged, the genesis of the Su-57. The origins of the Su-57 are rooted in the shifting strategic environment that followed the Cold War. With the collapse of guaranteed defense budgets and the loss of the Soviet Union's central planning, Russian aerospace firms found themselves in unfamiliar territory. Incremental improvements were no longer sufficient. If Russia was to retain relevance as an air power, it needed something new. Western advancements, especially in stealth technologies, sharpened Moscow's resolve. The appearance of America's F-22 and, soon after, the F-35 made clear that superiority would no longer rest on numbers, but on qualitative breakthroughs. Russian leadership framed their response around the concept of a fighter that could counter these Western standards, not by simple imitation, but by leveraging domestic strengths and addressing specific operational requirements. The Su-57 program, first revealed as PAKFA, reflected these ambitions. Russian designers aimed to combine advanced avionics and a degree of stealth with the tradition of agility and ruggedness for which Sukhoi aircraft are known. The goal: a fighter that blended digital sensor fusion, increasing awareness and survivability, with classic flight performance and adaptability. Creating such an aircraft proved challenging. Sanctions disrupted access to vital components. Financial and industrial constraints forced Russian engineers to pursue indigenous solutions, sometimes at significant cost. Problems with microelectronics and composite materials introduced further delays. Each stage of development, each flight, each setback sparked debate among analysts and officials. Some described the project as the symbol of national resurgence. Others feared it would remain an expensive, incomplete promise. The finished aircraft is not a mirror of its Western competitors. The Su-57 pursues good enough stealth, reduced radar signature, but not at the expense of extreme maneuverability. The jet's signature agility is preserved with thrust vectoring engines, and its survivability is increased through design choices that blend traditional and modern approaches. Beyond hardware, the Su-57 occupies a prominent place in Russian defense messaging. Export opportunities, particularly with the Su-57E, are intended not just to drive sales, but to support Russia's geopolitical objectives, building ties with new partners and increasing its influence in strategically important regions. Each public demonstration and each foreign interest serve to reinforce the message. Russia is actively participating in the generation of advanced military technologies. Yet the key question remains: is the Su-57 truly a peer to its competitors? Or does it gain disproportionate impact from the uncertainty it introduces into Western planning? The F-22's shadow, America's standing and calculus. The shock that comes with the Su-57's emergence must be considered in light of America's established framework for air dominance built around the F-22 Raptor. From the outset, the F-22 embodied the U.S. commitment to air superiority, combing stealth, speed, and cutting-edge avionics in a form that would deter any adversary. Today, the U.S. maintains a fleet of about 165 F-22s, according to the 2025 edition of the Military Balance. This relatively small number stemmed from calculations made in the early 21st century when the threat of high-intensity warfare seemed remote. At the time, the F-22s, alongside upgraded fourth-generation aircraft, appeared more than adequate to underpin American air supremacy. Now, the maintenance and longevity of the F-22 loom as challenges. The complexity of the airframe and electronics make sustaining the fleet increasingly difficult, with each new year raising questions of obsolescence and replacement. Plans for the F-A-20, the Navy's hoped-for sixth-generation fighter, remain unresolved, a source of concern as rivals work to close the gap. Against this backdrop, each reported improvement in the Su-57 is closely observed. Even in modest numbers, its presence modifies assumptions about U.S. freedom of action in contested airspace, from Europe to the Asia-Pacific. The evolution of a credible fifth-generation adversary, equipped with modern avionics and the capacity for hypersonic munitions, forces a re-evaluation of existing tactics and contingency planning. For American defense planners, every operational Su-57 triggers a reassessment. What would be the real consequences if U.S. Raptors or F-35s confront these Russian platforms in future crises? Scenarios that were once low probability now demand rigorous planning, as the distinction between first look, first shot advantage and parity narrows. Meanwhile, internal debates over budget priorities and timelines for next-generation replacements intensify. Each delay, each unaddressed gap represents a risk, one that adds urgency to the ongoing investment in training, technology, and tactical flexibility. The Su-57's slow but steady entrance compels the U.S. to maintain vigilance and to ensure its edge is not eroded by complacency or by an overestimation of past achievements. Anatomy of a challenge, stealth, avionics, and hypersonic edge. Examining the Su-57's design philosophy underlines Russia's approach: adaptation under pressure and selective adoption of Western advances. The aircraft features pronounced canted fins, a blended wing fuselage, and weapons bays designed to minimize radar cross-section, improving survivability but not at the cost of maneuverability. Sensor fusion is another pillar. The Su-57 is equipped with a network of onboard sensors covering radar, infrared, and electronic domains. While analysts often note that Russian avionics systems lag behind those of the US, particularly in terms of software integration and user interface, the Su-57 marks a meaningful step forward for Russian air forces in bringing information together for pilots. Perhaps the most attention-grabbing feature is the Su-57's ability to carry hypersonic missiles. This extends its utility beyond air-to-air combat, threatening new realms of anti-access and strike warfare. Hypersonic munitions compress adversaries' reaction times and challenge traditional defenses, forcing new spending and doctrinal recalibration among NATO states. Constraints remain. Most Su-57s in service do not yet use the intended new engine, known as the Izdeliye 30, and instead rely on legacy power plants that limit certain performance goals, including sustained supersonic flight without afterburner, supercruise. International sanctions have further affected the steady production and integration of advanced subsystems, contributing to slow procurement. Nonetheless, the mere presence of these aircraft in Russian units is a factor that demands attention from NATO and US planners. Even if numbers remain small, the uncertainty about its true operational effectiveness is disruptive, prompting defensive upgrades, altered training, and continuous scrutiny. Beyond borders, the export gambit. Russia's offer of the Su-57E for export has strategic significance beyond sales revenue. By exporting limited numbers of advanced fighters to partners, Russia seeks to deepen security relationships, diversify its sources of technological diffusion, and alter the calculations of other regional actors. Potential buyers, including countries in Asia, Africa, and possibly the Middle East, are attracted not solely by the airframe's performance, but by the promise of technology transfers, joint production, and a measure of independence from US-dominated procurement pipelines. These sales carry implications not just for regional balances, but for the future development of homegrown aviation industries among buyer states. The Su-57E's technology transfer potential is significant. Prospective partners may seek to localize production or secure avionics upgrades. This could facilitate the spread of advanced sensors, countermeasures, and stealth design know-how to new regions, increasing the complexity of future battle spaces for the US and its allies. Every export agreement, therefore, is also a strategic challenge. Should a foreign nation field the Su-57E, American forces could find themselves facing stealth-capable opponents operating with different methods, levels of training, and political motivations. The destabilizing impact is not just operational, it is doctrinal and diplomatic, reshaping alliances and potentially undermining established patterns of deterrence. Each fighter delivered and each transfer of technology represents a new variable. Russian state messaging and international demonstrations aim to deepen this effect, highlighting perceived weaknesses in Western procurement or readiness and signaling Moscow's continued relevance on the world stage. Operational hurdles, procurement, and real-world readiness. Despite its prominence, the Su-57's fielding faces distinct limits. Economic sanctions, particularly since 2014, have strained Russia's capacity to acquire high-end microelectronics, composites, and specialized manufacturing equipment. This complicates both the pace of serial production and the integration of advanced features. Most frontline Su-57s initially relied on engines derived from the Su-35, which, while capable, do not fully realize the intended leap in performance. Meanwhile, integrating and producing radar-absorbent coatings at scale and introducing reliable domestic sensors and avionics remain ongoing engineering and industrial challenges. Procurement rates reflect these constraints. Unlike the US, which inducts larger numbers of fifth-generation fighters, Russia produces the Su-57 in limited batches. Deliveries have been incremental rather than transformational, a factor of budget, industrial capacity, and conscious policy. Operational integration is ongoing. Russian exercises and open-source assessments suggest incremental improvements, including the use of modern sensor fusion, development of tactics that pair the Su-57 with existing platforms, and exploration of standoff missile capabilities. The small size of the Su-57 fleet so far means it is likely concentrated in elite units, potentially enhancing its value as a deterrent and undermining adversary certainty. The small fleet size, however, limits the Su-57's ability to shape outcomes independently. Its outsized impact derives in part from the uncertainty it creates, forcing adversaries to reconsider intelligence priorities and defense investments, and to rehearse responses to capabilities that may or may not be fielded at scale. The symmetry and asymmetry of airpower competition. While the emergence of Russian stealth capability might echo past arms races, today's competition is substantially more complex. American advantage now rests as much on the integration of systems and networks as on raw platform performance. The US doctrine prioritizes all-domain operations and persistent superiority in surveillance, communications, and rapid response. By contrast, Russia has developed a doctrine informed by resource constraints and technological adaptation. The Su-57 trades some aspects of extreme radar evasion for agility and flexibility, relying on pilots to leverage partial stealth, advanced missiles, and electronic warfare to create dilemmas for adversaries. Russian tactics emphasize adaptability, sometimes favoring unorthodox approaches over doctrinal orthodoxy. This competition, therefore, is asymmetric in nature. American investments in first look, first shot, first kill capability are now matched by Russian efforts to complicate detection, compress engagement timelines with hypersonic weapons, and blend legacy and new assets for maximum unpredictability. The possibility that export variants may spread these capabilities further complicates the planning environment for the US and allies. Even a limited number of stealth fighters or hypersonic-equipped platforms in contested regions would force ongoing adaptation, new investments in detection, countermeasures, pilot training, and joint exercises. Strategists and practitioners alike acknowledge that while America maintains a resource and experience advantage, the spread of advanced technology can quickly recalibrate balances. New players with even limited high-tech arsenals, through purchase, partnership, or indigenous development, impose costs and sow ambiguity, consequences not easily neutralized by legacy doctrines. Reverberations at the summit, policy and posture. Within US defense leadership, the arrival of the Su-57 is interpreted with a mix of caution and resolve. The recognition that air superiority is contingent, that it must be maintained through investment, innovation, and adaptation, spurs both regular reviews and major procurement decisions. Policy actions, such as large-scale investments in new fighter programs, reflect these concerns. However, investment alone is insufficient. Each Su-57 induction, export overture, or published capability feeds an ongoing competitive cycle. For the Pentagon, this means perpetual reassessment, updating models, enhancing countermeasures, and deepening the integration of platforms and training for pilots. Deterrence now rests on the ability to anticipate and adapt to evolving threats, rather than relying solely on technology. Russian planners observe these responses closely. In their perspective, the Su-57's role is not just technological. It is psychological and diplomatic, introducing uncertainty, creating leverage in international discussions, and reinforcing the idea that parity, even in limited domains, is attainable. As more countries seek advanced aviation capabilities through formal partnerships, technology transfer, or other routes, the environment in which US Airpower must operate becomes more complex. The proliferation of stealth technology is not a distant prospect, but a present challenge, one which demands cooperation among allies and continued support for research, development, and operational readiness. A calculated shift. The Su-57 does not herald a new age of Russian dominance, nor is it a paper threat. Its introduction marks a transition, a signal that American dominance in the skies can no longer be assumed based solely on past investment or legacy. The effect is twofold, compelling Western aerospace programs to continue innovating and compelling policymakers to approach air dominance as a continually evolving goal. Every Su-57 in service is therefore both capability and signal, a functional airframe with tangible, if still developing, combat applications and a visible manifestation of national intent. For Western audiences, the lesson is clear. Air superiority, long considered a strategic certainty, is now a contested arena where measured steps, informed caution, and continuous adaptation are required. Ongoing research into propulsion, deeper understanding of networked operations, and the rigorous training of crews are the responses demanded by this shift. The skies above, once a relative sanctuary, are now recognized as dynamic battle spaces, contested environments where expertise must be continually refreshed. Outro. The rise of the Su-57 is both caution and catalyst. It demonstrates that air dominance, once the bedrock of U.S. strategic assumptions, faces new tests from advances in technology, shifts in doctrine, and evolving ambitions across the globe. As distinctions between competitor and peer blur, and as innovation accelerates in multiple directions, the quest for control of the skies grows more complex. For pilots, strategists, and policymakers, the emergence of the Su-57 is a clear reminder. Air supremacy is an ongoing contest, never a settled prize. Whether as operational capability or as a factor shaping adversary plans, the Su-57 demands vigilance, adaptability, and respect, hallmarks of a security environment where continued investment in technology and tactics remains essential. As the world's most advanced militaries plan for tomorrow's threats, the appearance of the Su-57 ensures that the competition in the heavens will continue to shape the future of strategy and security.